County 111.
Yes, I'd like to report a body.
What do you mean a body?
A dead person.
Can you tell if it's a male or female or?
It's pretty badly burned.
On the morning of May 8, 2002, Ottawa County, Michigan, was like any other day, calm, quiet, and seemingly ordinary. But beneath this peaceful surface, a horrifying secret lay buried, waiting to be discovered. It was around 2 p.m. when local farmer Gordon DeVries decided to take a detour through his blueberry fields. What he found that day would haunt him forever. As Gordon approached a cluster of trees, something shiny caught his eye. At first, he thought it was nothing more than a piece of metal reflecting the sunlight. But as he got closer, his heart sank. There, buried among the undergrowth, was a metal footlocker. The air was thick with the stench of burnt flesh and gasoline, and when he opened the locker, he made a gruesome discovery: a charred human body. Hello and welcome back. If you are new to our channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future videos. Now, let's dive into this heartbreaking story.
In May 2002, on one of your pieces of property that you owned, did you happen to come upon a dead body?
I did.
Which piece of property was it that you came upon that dead body at?
152nd Avenue and Winnan Street in Grand Haven Township.
And that's in Ottawa County?
Yes.
Is that what you would have observed on that day?
Yes.
As you were driving in? Was that there the day before?
No.
So what do?
Well, when I stopped and looked at the tree, then I looked down and I observed the body.
So you drive into your property, as you're driving up this 2-track, you stop. Where exactly did you stop, do you think?
Right across from the scorch.
Right across from the scorch. And you're telling the jury at that point you see a body?
Yes. Well, I had forgotten my cell phone that day, so I went to the neighbors and got him, and we observed the body, and we called 911.
Gordon rushed to a neighboring farm to call 911, setting off a chain of events that would baffle investigators for years.
County 111.
Yes, I'd like to report a body.
What do you mean a body?
A dead person.
Okay, where at?
Okay, Grand Haven Township.
Uh-huh.
Let's see, 152nd and Winnan.
Okay.
About 100 yards to the east of 152nd on Winnan.
East of 152nd on Winnan?
Yep, and I'll be there with a pickup, sitting, waiting for someone to...
Was it in the woods or?
It's in my field, and it's burned. And it wasn't there yesterday.
Can you tell if it's a male or female or?
It's pretty badly burned.
Deputies from the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office arrived quickly, securing the area. The investigation was led by Detective Robert Donker, a seasoned investigator who had seen his fair share of gruesome cases. But this one was different. This one was unlike anything they had ever encountered. Upon examining the crime scene, investigators were immediately confronted with the gruesome nature of the crime. The victim had been brutally murdered and then set on fire. The remnants of a hammer, a charred bat, and a tightly coiled rope around the victim's neck painted a picture of a horrific struggle. It was clear that this was not just a case of arson, it was a cold-blooded murder. The body was so badly burned that identifying the victim seemed impossible. The medical examiner, Dr. Cole, faced a daunting task. Fingerprints were out of the question. The hands had been incinerated beyond recognition. However, Dr. Cole was able to determine that the victim was male and had suffered from severe blunt force trauma to the skull, likely inflicted by the hammer found at the scene. But this was not the cause of death. There was no smoke in his lungs. The autopsy revealed that the victim had been strangled, his neck broken, with traces of a melted plastic bag adhered to the back of his skull. The fire had been set post-mortem, an attempt to destroy evidence. Detective Donker and his team were left with more questions than answers. Who was this man? Who could have committed such a brutal crime? The only clue they had was the victim's extensive dental work, which appeared to be foreign and possibly not performed in the United States. Dental molds were taken, and DNA samples were sent to national databases, but no matches were found. A theory emerged that he might have been a migrant worker who met a violent end. The victim, now labeled as a John Doe, was buried under the nickname Jack in the Box at Lakeshore Cemetery in Grand Haven Township, Michigan. On his tombstone, the locals wrote, "Unidentified man, May 2002, known only to God." In 2005, David Schock, a communications professor at Hope College in Michigan, was asked to create a documentary about the brutal murder of the Jack in the Box victim. David and his team were granted exclusive access to the crime scene and the investigators. The result was a powerful, nearly hour-long documentary. Ottawa County Sheriff's Office hoped this documentary would reignite the case, but to their disappointment, no one came forward. It wasn't until 2015, 10 years after the documentary aired, an unexpected tip arrived. An anonymous email suggested that Jack in the Box might be Roberto Caraballo, also known as Juan Cintron, the stepfather of a woman named Dinian Ducharme. Detectives immediately tracked down Dinian, who confirmed that her stepfather Roberto had indeed disappeared around May 2002 in Michigan. When watching the documentary, Dinian realized the metal footlocker at the scene looked similar to the one her mother owned. Moreover, Roberto was small in stature, similar to the description of the unidentified migrant worker body. With this new lead, investigators rushed to investigate Roberto's profile. Roberto Caraballo was an immigrant from the Dominican Republic, lived in the U.S. under the alias Juan Cintron. He fell in love with Beverly McCallum, who had two daughters, Dinian Ducharme and Tasha Byam. They eventually got married and had another daughter, Cicely. However, Roberto had a history of fraud, which landed him in prison multiple times. Investigators also discovered that Roberto had been reported as missing by his parole officer after he was last heard from on May 6, 2002. According to Dinian Ducharme, her mother Beverly was controlling and manipulative. Her parents' relationship was toxic. When asked about Roberto's disappearance, her mother claimed that he had gone to Canada. Shortly after that, she fled to Jamaica with her longtime lover. The detectives immediately searched through prison records. They didn't find Roberto's name, but discovered his alias, Juan Cintron, tied to an address in Charlotte, Michigan, 334 Horatio Street. This was the same address where Dinian said she lived with her family. A dental record check confirmed the grim truth. Roberto Caraballo was indeed Jack in the Box. Finally, after 13 years, the case was reopened. Armed with a search warrant, investigators and forensic teams swarmed 334 Horatio Street, where Dinian and Roberto once lived. The house was empty, showing signs of recent remodeling. Despite a thorough search, they found no trace of a crime. No forensic evidence, no signs of repairs hiding anything sinister. Frustrated, the investigators had no choice but return to Dinian for more answers. This time, Dinian seemed ready to reveal everything. She shockingly confessed that Roberto's murder had taken place in the basement of the house. Her mother Beverly had two trunks, a green one for photos and a black trunk, similar to the one Roberto was found in, was always kept by the bed, but had vanished around the time Roberto disappeared. One night, her mother ordered her to chip away and replace a patch of concrete in the basement because there was blood splatter on the floor. She mentioned a man named Chris, who could confirm her story about Roberto's murder, if the detectives could find him. Investigators returned to 334 Horatio Street. Focusing on the basement, the forensic team began scraping away paint and searching for cement patches. They discovered two different patches of cement. After scraping paint along the basement stairs and posts, they sent all the materials for testing. A few weeks later, the results confirmed human DNA in the paint scrapings and cement pieces matched Roberto's. The detectives now had enough evidence to confirm that the basement had been the scene of a brutal murder. With this confirmation, the detectives finally contacted Roberto family. They learned that some member of Roberto family had tried reaching out to Beverly in October 2002, but received nothing. However, they had the address of an important witness, Cicely, Roberto and Beverly's youngest daughter. In October 2016, the detectives arrived in Houston, Texas, to inform Cicely about her father's tragic death. Shocked and distressed, Cicely spoke of a different Roberto, the man who had brought happiness to her life. Cicely painted a stark picture of her childhood. Her mother, Beverly, ruled the household with an unyielding fist, controlling every aspect of their lives. She described her mother as a master manipulator, dictating their every move. Beverly even discouraged Cicely from using her real name on social media. She made a list of aliases for her to pick one. But when Roberto was released from prison, everything changed. His arrival brought a sense of order and stability that Cicely had never known. He introduced routines into their lives, took her to the local recreation center, encouraged her to participate in gymnastics and softball. Roberto even retreated to the basement for moments of solitude where he would make phone calls to relatives, write letters, and read his Bible in peace. But everything took a dark turn one day.
A part of my regular routine was to come home after school and go to the basement to greet my father and let him know that I was home. So there was a padlock and it wasn't accessible anymore. Although she told me that he took off to Canada, I at the time could connect that Canada was within driving distance and his vehicle was still in the driveway. So I thought that was strange.
The first thing Cicely noticed was the basement door, once always accessible, was now secured with a heavy padlock. She confronted Beverly, asking about Roberto's whereabouts. Beverly's response was cold and dismissive. She claimed Roberto had abandoned the family, returning to his old life in Canada. Yet something felt terribly wrong. Roberto's car remained parked in the driveway, untouched, and his personal belongings were still scattered throughout the house, as if he had never intended to leave. The inconsistencies in Beverly's story fueled a growing suspicion that something far more sinister had occurred. On the night Roberto vanished, Cicely remembered being jolted awake by her mother. The three sisters, Cicely, Dinian, and Tasha, were bundled into a van and driven away. She quickly slept, only to be awoken by the sound of an explosion. There she saw her half-sister Dinian sprinting through the night, flames flickering in the woods. She watched in stunned silence as Dinian desperately tried to catch up to the van, while their mother, with a cold determination, sped away from the blazing inferno, leaving the fire, and whatever it consumed, far behind.
Yes, I remember being startled out of my sleep and rushed into our family van. I was used to the turmoil, so somewhere along everything, I was asleep in the back of the van. I know we were driving for quite some time, just because I know Charlotte is a small town, and we were in there for a while on the road. Like I said, I remember falling asleep and being woken up by an explosion in the woods was the next I recall from that night. I sat up and looked out the back of the window where the explosion was coming from. I noticed my half-sister running from the woody area away from the fire. Our van was already pretty much moving. The door was open, and she was trying to catch up to the vehicle as if it was a getaway van.
As the detectives recalled that Roberto had been discovered in a charred, wooded area, it all began to click into place. The image of a massive bonfire, burning away evidence of a terrible crime, haunted their thoughts. Determined to uncover the truth, they delved deeper into Cicely's memories, piecing together the fragmented story of her life under Beverly's iron grip. Cicely recalled she and her sisters used to play the roles of henchmen, carrying out their mother's commands without question. Beverly would use fear as a weapon, especially when being asked about Roberto's disappearance. But Cicely's determination to uncover the truth never wavered. She eventually reached out to her father's side of the family. By the time she turned 18, she made the bold decision to leave the house, leave the toxic environment behind for good. Then Cicely remembered a bombshell detail. A man named Christopher McMillan was a close friend of both Beverly and Dinian. He frequently visited her house around the time her dad went missing. This is the man Dinian had mentioned before. Luckily, Cicely had a photo of him. Even more shocking, in 2014, Cicely mustered the courage to confront her mother. Face to face with the woman who had controlled her life for so long, Cicely demanded to know the truth about what had happened to Roberto. And Beverly did confess.
And so how my mom described it is that as she was going up the stairs, my dad began to pull her by her ankles to pull her back down, and that she grabbed the nearest thing she could with her right hand, which happened to be a crowbar, is what she said, and she swung it like that, the back of her head, to try to get away from him, and that her words, he started bleeding profusively from the head.
When asked why she hadn't called an ambulance, Beverly dropped a chilling response. She claimed Dinian and her friend Chris were already on their way to the basement, intent on finishing what had started. It was Dinian and Chris who were responsible for Roberto's death. Beverly was powerless to stop them. This struck Cicely as deeply strange. Beverly had always been the one in control, the mastermind behind every decision. How could she now claim to be helpless? The investigation then shifted back to Michigan, where they tracked down Christopher McMillan in Grand Rapids. When they finally sat down with him, the information he revealed would send shockwaves through the case. Over the course of 3 interviews, Christopher confirmed his close ties to both Dinian and Beverly. He described how Roberto and Beverly's relationship was toxic, and Roberto never liked him. Christopher then shared how the plan to eliminate Roberto unfolded. One day in May 2002, while he was at their home, another heated argument erupted between Roberto and Beverly. It was Beverly who orchestrated the murder. She told him Roberto was abusive toward her mother and the sisters physically, mentally, sexually. Christopher then agreed to help them get rid of Roberto for good. Beverly was the one who made the sinister plan. Her idea was chillingly straightforward. She would push Roberto down the basement stairs. Once he was unconscious, they would suffocate him. Christopher confessed that they even conducted a dry run the day before the murder. He went along with the scheme, partly because he didn't believe the 2 women would actually follow through without his help. But as he recounted the events of May 7, 2002, it became clear how wrong he had been. That morning, Beverly summoned Dinian and Christopher to the basement. She handed Christopher a wooden baseball bat and laid out the final part of the plan. After she pushed Roberto down the stairs, Christopher was to knock him out cold. With the stage set, Beverly left. Christopher and Dinian waited, nervously smoking as they listened to the muffled sounds of Roberto and Beverly talking upstairs. Finally, the basement door creaked open. Christopher watched as Beverly, with cold precision, kicked Roberto down the stairs. Roberto came crashing down, landing on his knees at the bottom of the staircase, dazed but conscious. Christopher swung the bat at Roberto's head but missed. He struck a concrete post. The bat shattered into pieces. The plan now spiraled into a disastrous turn.
Down comes Robert, and Beverly was behind him. They come down a few steps. Beverly kicked Robert down the stairs. I swung the bat. I hit the post. I broke the bat. He was kind of at his knees.
In the midst of the chaos, Christopher saw Dinian swing a hammer at Roberto's head with a force that sent a shiver down his spine. Blood spattered, but it wasn't enough to finish the job. At that moment, Beverly calmly instructed Dinian to hand over the hammer. With a cold precision, Beverly took the hammer and began striking Roberto on the left side of his head. The sound of bone cracking echoed through the basement until, finally, the hammer lodged deep into Roberto's skull. Stunned by the brutality unfolding before him, Christopher hesitated for a moment, but then he stepped forward. With a sickening pull, he yanked the hammer free from Roberto's shattered skull. He described it as a hole about $half size on his head.
And Beverly starts to tell Deneen, "Give me the hammer, give me the hammer." Well, Deneen takes the hammer and with her right hand wants to hit him a couple times on the left side of his head. Beverly jerks the hammer away, and with their left hand on the left side of the head, hits him like 3 or 4 more times until the hammer was in his head. So he was on his knees with the hammer sticking out of his head. I took the hammer, I pulled the hammer out. I'm holding the hammer. There's a hole, about $half size.
Christopher let the hammer slip from his bloodied hands, the clatter against cold floor echoing in the tense silence. As he turned, Dinian pulled a plastic bag over Roberto's head, her movements swift and practiced. She tightened a rope around his neck. Beverly pinned Roberto's body to the ground, using her weight to hold him down. Christopher stood frozen, watching in a daze as Dinian methodically suffocated Roberto, the plastic bag clinging to his face. He admitted until the bag quit moving in and out, and he quit breathing. After Roberto was dead, the trio stripped off their blood-stained clothes and went to a store to buy cleaning supplies. Beverly and Dinian went straight to the basement to scrub away the evidence. Christopher remained upstairs, a silent guardian of their dark secret, waiting for the clock to tick past the school day's end. When the time came, he left to pick up Tasha, and Cicely kept a straight face as if nothing had happened. Later that evening, under the cover of darkness, Beverly and Dinian stuffed Roberto's lifeless body into the metal footlocker. Chris then helped them load the body into the back of Roberto's own van.
How do you know that Robert is in that trunk?
Because it wasn't closed all the way, and I lifted the lid up and tried to close it. I couldn't get it closed.
Now, when you go down to that basement, do you see the bat?
No.
How about the hammer that you pulled out of his head?
No.
Did you ever see that bat or hammer ever again?
No.
So you are told to help pick Robert up and take him out of the house?
Yes.
Who tells you to do that?
Beverly.
Once again, it's the defendant telling you what to do, is that right?
Yes.
Who does she tell to do that to?
Deneen and myself.
So Deneen, who is the defendant's daughter, and you then carry Robert out of the basement in that trunk?
Yes.
Where do you carry him to?
We put him in the back of a van that Robert owned.
So you're using Robert's own van to carry him away?
Yes.
Now, what else do you do once you put Robert in the van?
We put a gas can back there.
Why did you put a gas can back there?
Because we're going to burn the body.
Who told you were going to do that?
Beverly.
Beverly then dragged Tasha and Cicely to the van, where Roberto's body lay hidden. Dinian drove to a nearby gas station, purchasing gasoline under Beverly's orders. After driving nearly 45 minutes into the dark countryside, they finally found a secluded, wooded area. Christopher and Dinian dragged the footlocker out of the van, using a cushion to push the heavy trunk across rough terrains. Beverly quietly followed them. After a tense exchange, Dinian returned to the van, leaving Christopher alone with Beverly in the eerie stillness of the woods. With the gasoline soaking through the undergrowth and the footlocker, Beverly and Christopher shared a silent glance. Then he ignited the fire, watching as the flames hungrily consumed Roberto's body. Then they turned their backs on the burning pyre, fleeing the scene and leaving behind only ashes and the lingering scent of gasoline in the air. The reality of Beverly's role in the crime was now undeniable. She wasn't just involved, she was the orchestrator of this chilling, calculated act.
So what happens after that ring is obtained?
We pour gas on the body,
Who poured gas on her?
Beverly and I.
You both poured gas on
She
her?
poured the gas, I lit the fire.
After disposing Roberto's body, the trio immediately discarded their blood-soaked shoes. The next morning, while Beverly took the van to get all the tires replaced, Christopher and Dinian were ordered to paint over the splattered blood. They had to chip away at the old cement, bit by bit, then mix a fresh batch of cement to cover the areas where the blood had soaked in too deeply, sealing away the last physical traces of their crime. As the cleanup concluded, Beverly and Dinian began packing up the house. To avoid suspicions, Beverly spread the lie that Roberto had abandoned the family. Then she took Cicely and Tasha to Jamaica, while Dinian moved to Texas. Christopher, still under Beverly's influence, also relocated to Jamaica. In 2018, arrest warrants were finally issued for Dinian Ducharme, Christopher McMillan, and Beverly McCallum. Christopher, facing overwhelming evidence, decided to cooperate with the authorities. In October 2019, he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder, earning a minimum sentence of 15 years in prison. However, Dinian steadfastly maintained her innocence and refused any plea deals. Her trial took place in December 2021, where she faced charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and mutilation of a body. But it was Christopher's damning testimony that ultimately sealed her fate. Prosecutors highlighted Dinian's role in the murder, and attempts to shift all the blame onto her disappeared mother. The jury found Dinian guilty on all counts, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Yet, the story wasn't over. Beverly McCallum was nowhere to be found. Investigators dug deeper into Beverly's past, uncovering a string of marriages and suspicious circumstances. In 2007, one of her former husbands, Rennie McCallum, also mysteriously disappeared in Texas. In 2015, while hiding in a relative house in Texas, Beverly met her new husband, Zishan Muzam, a Pakistani teacher. As the investigation into Roberto's murder heated up in 2018, she moved to Pakistan, got a new life abroad. After years on the run, she was finally arrested in February 2020 in Rome. Her name was flagged in the Interpol database when she checked into a hotel. The arrest was a significant breakthrough, but the legal process of extraditing Beverly from Italy to the United States proved to be lengthy and complex. Although the US and Italy have an extradition treaty, the Italian justice system was hesitant to send Beverly back. They argued the conviction was too severe. Michigan officials had to reduce the charge from first-degree murder to second-degree murder. It took 2 years of legal wrangling before Beverly was finally extradited to Michigan in March 2024. Beverly's trial was one of the most anticipated criminal proceedings in recent years. The defense, led by attorney Timothy Havis, argued that Beverly had no direct involvement in Roberto's murder. They claimed she was merely an unwitting passenger in a crime orchestrated by her daughter, Dinian, and Christopher. However, the prosecution, led by State Prosecutor Douglas Lloyd, presented a damning case against her. Witness testimonies from Cicely and Christopher painted a starkly different picture. Beverly was the mastermind behind the gruesome murder. Beverly, maintaining her innocence, insisted she had been unaware of the murder and had only followed Dinian's instructions. On the stand, Beverly showed off her manipulation skills with web of lies and fake facts. But sometimes she had a slip of tongue.
Killed Robert that day, yes.
The day you killed Robert.
I can't hear what you said.
I did not kill Robert.
I believe you just said you killed Robert.
No. Oh. I did not kill Robert. I would never say I killed Robert. I never killed Robert. I didn't want to, I don't know, I couldn't stay in that house for one. I couldn't get away from them. There was a lot of things
You
going
couldn't
on.
stay in that house any longer because
No.
you knew that Robert was dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you helped kill Robert.
No.
The jury deliberated for just under 2 hours, a remarkably short time given the complexity of the case. When they returned with a guilty verdict, it was clear that Beverly's defense had failed. She was convicted of second-degree murder and desecration of a body. On May 23, 2024, Beverly McCallum, now 63 years old, was sentenced to 40 to 60 years in prison for the murder of Roberto Caraballo. She also received an additional 10 to 15 years for the desecration and disinterment of his body, with the sentences to be served concurrently. In a powerful victim impact statement, Cicely addressed her mother directly in court. She spoke of the deep wounds Beverly's actions had inflicted on her and her siblings, the years of confusion, fear, and pain. She recounted the loss of her father and the torment of living under her mother's manipulative control. For Cicely, the trial was not just about seeking justice for her father, but also about reclaiming her own life from the shadow of her mother's influence. The sentencing of Beverly McCallum marked the end of a long and painful chapter in the lives of those affected by Roberto's murder. For the investigators who worked tirelessly on the case, it was a moment of closure, bringing to justice a woman who had evaded accountability for nearly 2 decades. This case underscores the complexities of familial relationships and the dark undercurrents that can exist beneath the surface. It also highlights the resilience of those who seek justice, no matter how many years have passed. The story of Jack in the Box is not just a tale of murder, but of the emotional and psychological damage that reverberates long after the crime has been committed. It's a story that serves as both a cautionary tale and a beacon of hope for those still waiting for justice. As we reflect on this case, it's important to remember the lessons it teaches us about the human capacity for both cruelty and redemption. The case of Jack in the Box may have started with a horrific discovery in a blueberry field, but it ended with the long arm of justice finally catching up to those responsible. While nothing can bring back Roberto, the efforts of his loved ones, the investigators, and the prosecutors ensured that his story would not end in silence. What are your thoughts on this case? Was Beverly truly the mastermind, or did she become entangled in a plot that spiraled out of control? We'd love to hear it in the comments below. If you found this video compelling, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and remember, justice may be delayed, but it cannot be denied.